My brother got a sports car for graduation while my parents handed me a bucket of cleaning supplies, laughing that I needed to learn my true purpose. They didn't realize I held the deed to the house. I left, and their eviction began. The betrayal didn't feel like a sharp knife. It felt like a slow, crushing weight that finally snapped my spine. I was standing in the backyard of the home I grew up in, a glass of lukewarm punch in my hand, watching my father, Nolan, tap a spoon against his champagne flute. The sound was sharp, piercing through the humid afternoon air, silencing the small crowd of relatives and family friends who had gathered. I was exhausted. I had just come off a 60-hour work week at the architectural firm where I had recently been promoted to junior partner, a feat almost unheard of for someone only 25 years old. My eyes were burning, my feet ached in my heels, and all I wanted was a moment of recognition. Just a nod. A good job, Sadie. Anything to acknowledge that while my younger brother, Tyler, had managed to scrape a passing grade in business communications after 5 years of partying, I was actually building a future. "Attention, everyone," Nolan boomed, his chest puffed out in that peacock way he always did when he was about to spend money he didn't really have. He wrapped a heavy arm around Tyler's shoulders. Tyler, 22 and wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, grinned lazily, looking like the cat who had not only eaten the canary but had also been promised a second course. "Today we celebrate excellence," Nolan shouted, beaming. "My boy, a college graduate, it's a milestone that defines a man's life. Tyler, your mother and I are so incredibly proud of the man you've become. You are going to do great things. You are the future of this family." My mother, Cora, was standing to the side, dabbing at her dry eyes with a handkerchief. She looked at Tyler with a reverence usually reserved for religious icons. She didn't look at me. She hadn't looked at me since I arrived, except to criticize the length of my dress. "And because we know you're going places," Nolan continued, reaching into his pocket, "you need a way to get there in style." He pulled out a set of keys. They weren't just any keys. The fob was heavy, sleek, and unmistakably expensive. He tossed them to Tyler. "Brand new," Nolan announced as the crowd gasped. "Sports package, parked out front." Tyler let out a whoop, pumping his fist in the air as the relatives applauded. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I knew their finances. I knew they didn't have the liquidity for a brand new sports car. But I stayed silent, forcing a polite smile onto my face. Wait, Cora chirped, stepping forward. "We didn't forget our Sadie." My heart skipped a beat. For a fleeting, foolish second, hope flared in my chest. Had they finally noticed? Had they realized that I had paid for the catering today? That I had been the one to fix the roof last winter when it leaked? Maybe this was a moment of balance. Cora beckoned me over. "Come here, sweetie." I walked forward, the grass soft under my feet. The guests watched, smiling. Cora reached behind the patio table and pulled out a large, heavy cardboard box. It wasn't wrapped. It was open. "We know you've been busy with your little drawings at that office," Cora said, her voice dripping with a saccharine sweetness that barely masked the condescension. "But Tyler is going to be a busy businessman now. He won't have time for chores. And honestly, Sadie, you've been neglecting your duties as a daughter." She shoved the box into my hands. It was heavy. I looked down. Inside there was no jewelry, no card, no thoughtful memento. It was filled with industrial-sized bottles of bleach, floor wax, a pack of yellow rubber gloves, and a scrub brush. Resting on top was a laminated piece of paper titled Sadie's chore chart. "It's time you help around the house," Cora beamed, looking at the guests for approval. "A woman's greatest contribution is a clean home for her family, don't you agree?" The silence that followed was deafening to me, though a few relatives chuckled nervously. Then, the sound that broke me. Tyler snickered. It was a wet, ugly sound. He dangled his new car keys in front of my face, the metal jingling. "Better get scrubbing, sis. My rims are gonna need a shine later." I looked from the bleach in my arms to the keys in his hand. I looked at my father's smug pride and my mother's expectant smile. The humiliation wasn't just in the gift, It was in the public declaration of my worthlessness. They didn't see me as a daughter. They didn't see me as an architect. They saw me as the help. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. It was the realization that to them, I was already dead, merely a ghost haunting their house to clean up their messes. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The laughter of the guests sounded distorted. I was underwater. I stood there, clutching the cardboard box, the sharp plastic edge digging into my forearms. The smell of the lemon-scented chemicals wafted up, stinging my nose, a visceral reminder of the role they had assigned to me. "Well," Nolan prompted, his voice booming again, "what do you say to your mother? That's top-of-the-line wax." "Thank you," I whispered. The words tasted like ash. "Speak up, Sadie," Cora admonished, stepping closer and adjusting my collar with a forceful tug. "Don't be ungrateful. We feed you, we house you. The least you can do is keep the place presentable for your brother's guests." I looked at her, really looked at her. Cora was a woman who prided herself on appearances. She wore pearls to the grocery store and judged neighbors by the state of their lawns. Yet, looking at her now, I saw something ugly beneath the foundation and the hairspray. I saw a deep, abiding resentment for my independence. I need to put this inside," I managed to say, turning away before the tears that were burning my eyes could fall. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. "Put it in the utility closet," Tyler called out after me. "And maybe start with the downstairs bathroom. Someone missed the bowl." His friends, a group of guys who looked like clones of him in slightly cheaper suits, roared with laughter. I walked into the house I had grown up in, the house that smelled of my childhood and my grandmother's lavender perfume. I walked past the living room, where the furniture was arranged exactly how Cora liked it. I walked past the kitchen, where I had learned to cook because Cora didn't do messes. I reached my bedroom, closed the door, and set the box of cleaning supplies down on the floor. I didn't throw it. I didn't kick it. I placed it down with a terrifying calmness. My hands were trembling, not with sorrow, but with a cold, vibrating rage. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the chore chart, still resting on top of the bleach. Monday, scrub baseboards, Sadie. Tuesday, iron Tyler's shirts, Sadie. Wednesday, deep clean kitchen, Sadie. It went on for the entire week. There was no column for Tyler, no column for Mom or Dad, just me. I pulled out my phone. I had 3 missed calls from my boss, likely congratulating me again on the promotion, and a text from a colleague asking if I wanted to celebrate later. I looked at my bank app. I looked at my investment portfolio. I was 25, I had a 6-figure job, and I had significant savings. But more importantly, I looked at a specific folder in my cloud drive labeled Grandma's estate. They thought I was trapped. They thought that because I still lived here, because I was quiet, because I was the dutiful daughter, that I was dependent on them. They believed they held the power because they were the parents, the loud ones, the ones who took up all the space in the room. Cora's voice drifted up from the patio, shrill and happy. "Oh, Tyler deserves it. He's going to be a CEO one day, just you wait." I walked over to my closet and pulled out my suitcase. The vintage leather one Grandma had given me. My parents were celebrating their son's graduation and their own perceived generosity. They were drinking champagne and toasting to a future where Tyler ruled the world and I scrubbed his floors. They were so confident in their dominion over me. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten who actually signed the checks for the property taxes last year. And they had certainly forgotten the conversation we'd had at the reading of Grandma's Will 3 years ago, a conversation they had ignored because they were too busy complaining about not getting cash. I opened the suitcase and began to pack. I didn't pack everything, just the essentials, my clothes, my laptop, the framed photo of Grandma. I wasn't just leaving. Leaving was passive. Leaving was what victims did. I was preparing to evoke a reality they weren't ready for. As I folded a silk blouse, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I didn't look like a maid. I looked like a landlord who had just found tenants destroying her property. To understand why this box of bleach was an act of war, you have to understand the history of this house. And you have to understand my grandmother, Elise. Elise was a force of nature. She was one of the first female architects in the state, a woman who built skyscrapers in a world of men who wanted her to make coffee. She was tough, brilliant, and she saw right through people. Especially her son, my father, Nalan. Nalan was a dreamer who refused to wake up. He bounced from business venture to business venture, each one a spectacular failure funded by Elise. A frozen yogurt shop in the middle of winter, a specialized pet rock revival. He had a knack for losing money, and he always blamed the market, the government, or bad luck. Never himself. When he married Cora, things got worse. Cora didn't want to work. She wanted to be the queen of a castle she didn't help build. She fed Nalan's ego, telling him he was a genius who was just misunderstood, while simultaneously draining his accounts for appearances. Then came Tyler, the Golden Prince. From the moment he was born, he could do no wrong. If Tyler broke a vase, it was because the vase was placed poorly. If Tyler failed a test, the teacher was incompetent. And then there was me, Sadie. I was the quiet one, the one who liked math, the one who sat with Grandma Elise and looked at blueprints. Grandma saw herself in me. She nurtured me. She paid for my tuition when Nalan spent my college fund on a guaranteed stock tip that went to zero in a week. When Grandma got sick 3 years ago, I moved back home to care for her. I spent my nights changing her IVs and my days studying for my architectural exams. Nalan and Cora, they visited once a week to ask if she'd signed the checks yet. Tyler didn't visit at all. He was too busy rushing a fraternity. I remember the day she died. I was holding her hand. Nalan was in the hallway, arguing with a nurse about the cafeteria food. Sadie, she had whispered, her grip surprisingly strong. Don't let them eat you alive. You have the iron in you. They are just rust. When the will was read, the shock was palpable. Grandma had left modest cash sums to Nalan and Tyler, enough to buy a car or go on a trip, but not enough to retire. But the house, the beautiful, sprawling, 4-bedroom colonial that had been in the family for 50 years. The house that sat on 2 acres of prime real estate. She left it to me. I can still remember Nalan's face turning purple. It's a mistake, a clerical error, he had screamed at the lawyer. Cora had sneered, it doesn't matter. Sadie is a good girl, she knows who the head of the house is. It's just on paper for tax reasons, obviously. They convinced themselves of this lie. They rewrote reality to suit their ego. They told everyone and themselves that the house was theirs and that I was just holding it in trust because I was good with paperwork. For 3 years, I let them live in that delusion. I let them live there rent-free because they were family. I paid the property taxes. I paid the insurance. I paid for the new roof. And how did they repay me? They treated me like a squatter. Nalan, the financier, was currently unemployed but styled himself as a private investor. He spent his days watching financial news and critiquing my career choices. Architecture is a dying field, Sadie, he'd say while I paid the electric bill. You should look into crypto. Cora, the enforcer, spent her days managing the social calendar and ensuring Tyler had everything he needed. She policed my clothing, my dating life, which was non-existent because of my work hours, and my attitude. But the real malice came from their dynamic with Tyler. Tyler had learned from the best. He was 22, had never held a job, and treated me like his personal assistant. He'd leave his dishes in the sink because Sadie will get it. He'd borrow my car and return it with an empty tank, and if I complained, I was jealous. I was bitter. I looked at the cleaning supplies one last time. This wasn't just a bad gift. It was a statement. It was a declaration that no matter how high I climbed in the outside world, in this house, I was beneath them. They were trying to break me. They wanted to humiliate me into submission so I would stay here, scrubbing their floors and funding their lifestyle forever. They saw a maid. They didn't see the landlord. I zipped up my suitcase. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I walked over to my desk and picked up a thick manila envelope. Inside were the latest assessments of the property value, the deed with my name on it, and a letter from a real estate attorney I had consulted 6 months ago, just in case. I had hesitated then. I hadn't wanted to be the villain. I hadn't wanted to kick my own parents out on the street. But looking at that bottle of bleach, I realized something. I wasn't making them homeless. They had made themselves homeless the moment they decided their daughter was nothing more than a servant. I grabbed the handle of my suitcase. I didn't write a note. I didn't cry. I walked out of my bedroom, past the bathroom Tyler had told me to clean, and headed for the stairs. The party was still raging outside. I could hear them laughing. I walked down the stairs, the wheels of my suitcase thumping rhythmically. Thump, thump, thump. It sounded like a gavel coming down. The wheels of my suitcase glided silently over the polished hardwood of the entryway. Through the open French doors at the back of the house, I could still see the party in full swing. Tyler was now leaning against his new car, posing for photos while my father held court with a group of neighbors, undoubtedly bragging about his son's executive pote. Teal. My mother was busy refilling the punch bowl, her back to me, oblivious to the fact that her live-in servant was walking out the door. I didn't slam the front door. I closed it with a soft, definitive click. The silence of the front yard was a stark contrast to the noise out back. My own car, a modest but reliable sedan I had paid for myself, was parked on the street because Tyler's new sports car had been given the prime spot in the driveway. I loaded my suitcase into the trunk, got into the driver's seat, and locked the doors. For a moment, I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel. My heart wasn't racing. It was beating with a slow, heavy rhythm like a war drum. I looked at the house one last time, the ivy-covered trellis I had pruned, the porch I had painted last summer. It was a beautiful house. And for the first time in years, I didn't see it as a burden or a prison. I saw it for what it truly was, an asset. I started the engine and drove away without looking back. I checked into a hotel downtown, a place with crisp white sheets and room service, luxuries I could easily afford but had denied myself in my misguided attempt to save money for a family that despised me. Once I was settled, I didn't cry. I didn't mourn the relationship. That relationship had died the moment my mother handed me a bottle of bleach instead of a hug. I opened my laptop and set up a command center on the small hotel desk. It was time to stop being Sadie the daughter and start being Sadie the landlord. I pulled up the digital files from the Grandma's Estate folder. I reviewed the deed. Sole owner, Sadie Miller. I reviewed the trust agreement. It gave me unilateral power to sell, lease, or liquidate the property at my discretion. There was no clause for my parents' tenancy. There was no lease agreement. They were, legally speaking, guests who had overstayed their welcome. But I knew Nolan. He would fight dirty. He would lie. He would claim he had paid for the house or that Grandma had promised it to him verbally. I needed to be bulletproof. I opened my banking history and began to compile a spreadsheet. I went back 3 years, every property tax payment, every insurance premium, every repair bill, from the new water heater in 2024 to the roof repairs in 2025. I downloaded the receipts. I highlighted the dates. The total came to over $45,000 of my own money poured into a house they treated as their personal kingdom. Then I looked at their contributions. 0. In fact, it was worse than 0. I found the utility bills I had paid because Nolan had forgotten and the notices threatened shutoff. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved months ago. Lawson Real Estate Law, this is Sarah, a voice answered. Hi, Sarah, this is Sadie Miller. Is Mr. Lawson available? I need to initiate an immediate eviction process and prepare a property for an expedited sale. The situation has escalated. Mr. Lawson came on the line a moment later. He knew the background. I had consulted him when Grandma died, worried about my father's potential reaction. Sadie, he said, his voice calm and professional. I assume things didn't go well at the graduation party. You could say that, I replied, my voice steady. They think I'm the help, Mr. Lawson. I need them out. I want to list the house. What's the fastest way to do this legally? Since there is no lease, they are tenants at will, he explained. In this state, we need to serve them a 30-day notice to quit. If they aren't out by then, we file for eviction. However, if you want to sell, you can list it immediately. You have the right to show the property with reasonable notice. Do it, I said. Draft the notice to quit, serve them, and I want to hire a real estate agent immediately. I want a for sale sign on that lawn by the end of the week. It's going to get ugly, Sadie, he warned. I know, I said, looking at the chore chart I had crumpled into my purse. But I'm not the one who started this. I'm just finishing it. The silence from my family lasted exactly 4 hours. It was 8:00 p.m. when my phone started blowing up. I was sitting in the hotel restaurant, enjoying a steak dinner, my first peaceful meal in years. I watched the screen light up. Incoming call, Mom. Incoming call, Mom. Incoming call, Tyler. I let them go to voicemail. I wanted them to stew. I wanted them to realize that my absence wasn't just a pause in their service, it was a permanent resignation. Finally, a text from Cora popped up. Where are you? The kitchen is a mess from the party. Guests are still here. Come home and clean this up now. Unbelievable selfishness. I took a sip of my wine and typed a reply. I didn't send it immediately. I read it over, ensuring it was precise. I am not coming home. I am not cleaning the kitchen. The cleaning supplies you gave me are in your room. Use them. I hit send. The phone rang instantly. It was Nolan. I decided to answer. I need them to hear the steel in my voice. I swiped green and put it on speaker, setting the phone on the white tablecloth. What the hell is wrong with you? Nolan's voice was slurred. He had clearly enjoyed too much of the champagne I had paid for. You walk out of your brother's celebration, you embarrass your mother. Get your ass back here, Sadie. Now. No, I said calmly. Excuse me, Nolan sputtered. I am your father. I tell you what to do. You live under my roof. I'm going to stop you right there, Nolan, I cut in. I didn't call him Dad. You don't have a roof. You live under my roof. There was a pause, a confused, heavy silence. What are you talking about? Don't start with that grandma nonsense again. It's not nonsense, I said. I own the house. I have the deed. I have the trust documents. And for 3 years, I have let you live there out of kindness. But today, you made it very clear that you don't view me as family. You view me as a servant. So the servant has quit. You ungrateful little, Cora's voice shrieked in the background. Grab the phone, Nolan. Sadie, you listen to me. That house is ours. It's family property. It was family property, I corrected. Now it's a liquid asset. I'm selling it, Mom. You can't, Nolan laughed, though it sounded nervous. You can't sell a house with people living in it. We have rights, squatters' rights, family rights. Actually, I said, enjoying the moment more than I should have, my lawyer, Mr. Lawson, is preparing a formal notice to quit as we speak. You'll be served within 24 hours. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. After that, the sheriff will remove you. You wouldn't dare, Tyler's voice chimed in, sounding more annoyed than scared. You're bluffing. You're just throwing a tantrum because you didn't get a present. Grow up, Sadie. Come home, apologize, and maybe we'll forget this. I did get a present, Tyler, I said coldly. I got a bucket of bleach, and it gave me a lot of clarity. I'm not bluffing. The house goes on the market on Monday. I suggest you start packing. You can use the boxes from your new car parts. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was the adrenaline of finally, after 25 years, speaking the truth. I blocked their numbers for the night. I didn't want to hear their screaming. I wanted to sleep. The next morning, the reality hit them. I authorized Mr. Lawson to send the notice via a process server. I wasn't there to see it, but Mr. Lawson called me to confirm delivery. The server said your father tried to refuse the papers, Lawson reported. He threw them on the ground and threatened to sue the server for trespassing. But they've been served. The clock is ticking. 30 days. Good, I said. Now let's get the realtor in there. The antagonism shifted from angry phone calls to a full-blown siege. Since I had blocked their numbers, they turned to social media and extended family. My Aunt Linda, who lived 3 states away and knew nothing of the reality, sent me a scathing Facebook message. How could you do this to your parents? Making them homeless? After everything they've done for you, you should be ashamed. Cora had clearly spun a narrative. She was telling everyone that I had stolen the deed, that I had tricked Grandma on her deathbed, and that I was throwing them out because I was jealous of Tyler's success. I realized that silence wasn't an option. I had to dismantle their lies, not just legally, but socially. I drafted a mass email to the family members who were harassing me. I attached a PDF. It contained 3 things. A copy of Grandma's will, highlighting the section where she explicitly stated, "I leave the house to Sadie," as she is the only one who respects the value of hard work. A summary of the $45,000 I had spent on the house, contrasted with a bank statement showing Nolan's $0 contribution. A photo of the gift they had given me, the bleach and the chore chart. I wrote a simple caption, "I am not stealing anything. I am selling my own property because I refuse to be treated like a maid in a house I pay for. If you have further questions, you can direct them to my attorney." The messages from the family stopped abruptly. The truth, backed by receipts, is a powerful silencer. But Nolan and Tyler weren't done. They decided to sabotage the sale. I hired a top real estate agent, a sharp woman named Mrs. Higgins. She called me 2 days later, sounding frazzled. "Sadie, we have a problem," she said. "I tried to go over to the house to take the listing photos. Your father wouldn't let me in. He's changed the locks. He stood on the porch with a baseball bat and told me to get off his property." My blood ran cold. He had changed the locks on my house. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Higgins," I said. "Meet me there in an hour. I'm bringing backup." I called the non-emergency police line and requested a civil standby. I explained that I was the homeowner, I had the deed, and tenants were barring my entry. When I pulled up to the house an hour later, a police cruiser was already there. Mrs. Higgins was waiting by her car, looking nervous. Nolan was on the front porch, arms crossed, looking triumphant. Tyler was sitting on the hood of his new car, filming the scene with his phone, likely for some Karen compilation to mock me. I stepped out of my car, clutching my folder of documents. "Officer," Nolan shouted as I approached. "Arrest this woman. She's trying to illegally evict us. This is harassment." The officer, a weary-looking man named Officer Miller, no relation, looked at me. "Ma'am, is this your property?" "Yes, officer," I said, handing him the deed and the recent tax receipt. "I am the sole owner. These are my parents and brother. They are guests who have been given a notice to quit, but I have the right to enter my property to inspect it and list it for sale. They have changed the locks without my permission." Officer Miller reviewed the paperwork. He looked at the deed. He looked at Nolan. "Sir," the officer said, walking up the path, "this documentation is valid. This is Ms. Miller's property. You cannot bar her entry. Changing the locks on a landlord is illegal in this jurisdiction." "It's a fake," Nolan screamed, pointing at me. "She forged it. My mother would never give the house to a girl." "It's not a forgery, Dad," I said, my voice cutting through his hysteria. "And you know it. You were at the reading of the will. You just chose to ignore it because it didn't fit your fantasy." "This is my house," Nolan roared, stepping off the porch, his face red. "I raised you here. I paid for everything." "You haven't paid a bill in 3 years," I shot back, pulling out the second document, the spreadsheet of expenses. "I paid for the roof over your head. I paid for the heat. I paid for the water you shower in, and in return, you gave me a chore chart." Tyler jumped in, pointing his phone camera at me. "Wow, look at her. Kicking her own family out. You're heartless, Sadie, all for money." I turned to Tyler. No, Tyler, not for money, for dignity. And by the way, I checked the trust account. The one grandma left for emergency house repairs. I noticed a withdrawal last week, $5,000. Coincidentally, the exact down payment on a certain sports car lease. Tyler's face went pale. The camera lowered. That's embezzlement, Tyler, I said softly. I could press charges. Or you can give the officer the keys to the new locks, let the realtor in, and start packing. Nolan looked at Tyler. Tyler looked at his shoes. The bluster, the arrogance, it all evaporated in the face of the cold, hard legal reality. Give her the keys, Dad, Tyler muttered, his voice cracking. Nolan looked at me with pure hatred. He reached into his pocket and threw the new keys into the dirt at my feet. You're dead to us, Nolan spat. I know, I said, picking up the keys. I was dead to you the moment I stopped being useful. Now, step aside. Mrs. Higgins has photos to take. The house sold in 3 days. It turns out, a well-maintained colonial in a prime school district, priced aggressively because the seller wanted a quick close, moves fast. The closing date was set for 30 days out, coinciding perfectly with the end of the notice to quit. I didn't visit the house during that time. Mrs. Higgins handled the showings, reporting back that my parents would sit in the living room and glare at potential buyers, but they didn't dare block the door again. They knew the police were just a phone call away. The climax came on the final walkthrough. The buyers, a lovely young couple expecting their first child, wanted to do a final inspection before signing the papers the next morning. I had to be there to hand over the keys and ensure the property was vacant. I arrived at 10:00 a.m. A moving truck was parked in the driveway, not a professional one, but a frantic U-Haul rental that looked half-packed. I walked into the house. It was chaos. Boxes were everywhere. The pristine order Cora prized was gone, replaced by the messy reality of panic. My family was in the living room. Nolan was sitting on a box, his head in his hands. Cora was frantically wrapping porcelain figurines in newspaper. Tyler was pacing, looking furious. You're early, Tyler snapped when he saw me. We're not done. You had 30 days, I said, checking my watch. The buyers are coming in 2 hours. Anything left in this house after that becomes their property. Where are we supposed to go? Cora wailed, looking up at me with tear-streaked eyes. Sadie, please, we can't afford the apartments around here. They want first, last, and security. We don't have that kind of cash. You had cash, I reminded her. You had the money you were going to use for a cruise this summer. You had the money Tyler spent on bottle service last weekend. You made choices. We're your parents, Nolan stood. Up, his voice shaking. You can't do this. It's unnatural. A child is supposed to care for their parents. And parents are supposed to love their children without conditions, I said, my voice steady. They aren't supposed to treat one like a prince and the other like a servant. I walked over to the kitchen counter. The chore chart was still taped to the fridge, a pathetic remnant of their failed attempt to control me. I ripped it down. This, I said, holding up the laminated paper. This was the moment you lost your house. You didn't want a daughter. You wanted a maid. Well, the maid has resigned and the landlord is evicting you. Just then, there was a knock at the door. It wasn't the buyers. It was a man in a suit I didn't recognize. Is Tyler Miller here? The man asked. Tyler froze. That's me. I'm from the dealership, the man said, holding a clipboard. We received a notification that the financing on the vehicle fell through. The down payment check, drawn from a house trust account, was flagged as fraudulent by the account holder. I smiled. I had reported the unauthorized withdrawal from the trust immediately after the confrontation with the police. The bank had reversed the charge. We're here to repossess the vehicle, the man said. A tow truck was backing into the driveway behind the U-Haul. No, Tyler screamed, running to the door. You can't take it. My dad said he'd cover it. Nolan looked away, his shame complete. He couldn't cover it. He couldn't cover anything. I watched as the tow truck hooked up the shiny sports car. the symbol of Tyler's golden status, the reason I had been given bleach. It was dragged away, leaving tire marks on the driveway. Tyler turned to me, his face twisted in rage. "You did this. You ruined my life." "I didn't do anything, Tyler," I said calmly. "I just stopped paying for yours." I looked at the three of them, defeated, exposed, and finally facing the consequences of their own entitlement. "Get your boxes in the truck," I commanded. "You have 1 hour." They left at 11:55 a.m. The house was empty, echoing with silence. The buyers arrived at noon, thrilled with their new home, completely unaware of the family drama that had just played out within these walls. The sale went through the next morning. After paying off the closing costs and the small remaining mortgage Grandma had taken out for repairs years ago, the net proceeds hit my account. It was a substantial sum, enough to buy a small condo for myself outright and invest the rest for my future. I didn't keep all the money. I'm not cruel. I sent a check to Nalan and Cora for $10,000. Included with the check was a note. "This is for a deposit on a rental. Do not contact me again. If you do, I will file for a restraining order. Sadie." I heard through the grapevine, my Aunt Linda, who had finally apologized after seeing the receipts, that they had moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment in a neighboring town. Nalan had been forced to take a job as a greeter at a hardware store to make rent. Cora was actually cleaning houses for some of her old friends to make ends meet, a poetic justice that wasn't lost on me. Tyler had to move in with them. Without his car and without his parents' funding, his business career stalled before it began. He was working shifts at a call center, and rumor had it he was the one doing the chores now because Cora was too tired from her own job. As for me, I bought a beautiful loft in the city, closer to my firm. It has floor-to-ceiling windows and exposed brick. I hired a cleaning service that comes twice a month. I pay them well, I tip them generously, and I treat them with respect. I sat on my new balcony one evening, sipping wine, looking out at the city lights. I thought about the bleach. I thought about the chore chart. They wanted me to clean their house. Instead, I cleaned house. I scrubbed away the toxicity, I polished my self-worth, and I threw out the trash. I raised my glass to the night sky. "Thanks, Grandma," I whispered. "You were right, the rust is gone."